Let's talk about the Oscars. The 98th Academy Awards happened on Sunday night into Monday morning here in the UK. And of course the big winner, or at least, well, one of the big winners in a way, but the big winner, the one that won Best Picture, Adapted Screenplay, Supporting Actor and Director was One Battle After Another, which was kind of the film that, I mean, when it was released, there was kind of that build-up where people didn't really know what this film was, even from the trailers, and then it was released and everyone went nuts over it, and they were like, yeah, that's winning Best Picture, that's winning all these Oscars, and it kind of did in the end. I got to say, Sean Penn's performance, I think he's great, and I probably would have voted for him in that category. But I think the push that had really shows the strength of the performance, or at least the strength that voters and these awards bodies have found in it, because he didn't campaign. Notably, he hasn't campaigned. He wasn't at the Oscars, wasn't at the BAFTAs, at the Screen Actors Guild Awards, and has generally kind of taken a step aside, really, from all of this, for reasons that he hasn't mentioned, but, for one reason or another, he just hasn't campaigned for himself, and yet he has still won all of these awards. Meanwhile, you have Amy Madigan in Weapons. Again, a film that I'm not huge on. I liked it, and maybe in the wake of this I do need to revisit it, because I also thought, her performance was good, but I didn't entirely get all the hype around it. But it's a win that, people, is one of those I understand, really, as an inspired win. And it absolutely is. First of all, not nominated that film for anything else apart from her performance. And a horror like that, a role and a performance like that, away from your usual kind of social thriller kind of horror performances that tend to win. People will go to Silence of the Lambs, that kind of stuff. But away from those, it's a horror performance. And yes, maybe it helped that it's one of those where you can see the performance to some extent, you can see the acting, but it kind of, I think, took her a bit by surprise, the win as well, which was really nice to see. Ed Harris, her husband, sat next to her. The look he gave was wonderful, but absolutely an inspired win that I don't really have an issue with that winning, particularly with the way the night went for horror. And of course by that I mean Sinners. Michael B. Jordan took Best Leading Actor for his role in that film. Autumn Darrold Alcaport took Best Cinematography, first woman to win that award in the history of the award, in the history of the Academy, to win Best Cinematography. And a really lovely speech there. And of course, original screenplay for Ryan Coogler, and original score for Ludwig Göransson. A great score, Sinners. Really, really great score. So much character in that. Yes, the response to Sinners was kind of just on another level, really. And it was released pretty much a year ago, but the response that film got, and still got, and the way it was campaigned for and pushed, was just on this completely different level. It kind of had the response that the documentary short category got every time it was mentioned at the ceremony. It was one, I loved that. As they mentioned, or when they mentioned documentary short, there was just rapturous, wild applause, whoops and cheers by the sounds of it from the balcony in the, I think it's Dolby Theatre where the Oscars happen. That was wonderful to hear, as was just the general celebration of film that there was. And this was kind of there last year, that it felt like people were talking about, and there were a number of films this year about kind of art as therapy, in a way. Hamnet, sentimental value, it's there in Sinners. It's a key idea in a number of films, but that idea of just art and filmmaking and creativity, you look at, again, Sinners and One Battle After Another, two bold genre films, particularly Sinners. It's a really bold, original film. And absolutely Ryan Coogler's vision, because of the deal that was struck up, the way that film was made, what it's going to continue to be for years to come. And then One Battle After Another, this big cat and mouse, multi-layered political action thriller chase movie. And again, this does, and I've said this in the last few years, but it shows the Academy's changing. Beyond just embracing films like Everything Everywhere All at Once or The Shape of Water, it is going for these more genre-infused films. Yes, there may be more traditional films still nominated, although ones that are very much praised. F1 was there. But it's also highlighting films like Train Dreams, and I love Train Dreams. I would have given that Best Picture out of those nominees. In fact, I'd have probably given it each thing it was nominated for, aside from original song, although I do really like Nick Cave's song in that film. And it should be said that the performance of I Lied to You was just a huge celebration, and Golden is of course Golden. It's an absolute tune. But at least in the room, a lot of love for Train Dreams, but that is a really quiet film that wasn't really campaigned for. Netflix put their money more behind, well, of course, Frankenstein, but even more than that, J. Kelly, which didn't get nominated for anything. They put their money behind A House of Dynamite, again, not really nominated for anything. Train Dreams was a real word-of-mouth film, and there's a lot of word-of-mouth films that are getting nominated over the last few years. We saw it with I'm Still Here last year. Drive My Car, a good few years ago, was built up from the festival circuit. This year, that kind of happened a bit with The Secret Agent. It happened with Train Dreams, these independent films, these foreign language films that maybe otherwise they may not quite have sought out. And that's something that the Academy are trying to push and make sure that voters are better at. You know, this has always come down, award season, really, to campaigning, to what films studios tend to push, who they tend to push, what they highlight. And word of mouth is helping a bit with that. And also the fact that when it comes to nominated films, there probably needs to be something a little bit tighter put in place. But at least this year they said that you need to make sure that you tick and say that you've seen each of the films in the nominated categories, or in a category you have to watch each of the nominees, and then you can vote in it. And actually, you look at anonymous Oscar voter ballots, which, you know, can be nonsense a lot of the time. But at least they were admitting a bit more this time around that they abstained from a number of them. Now, unfortunately, that did seem to largely be documentary and animated feature, because there are a number of them saying, I just can't keep up because, you know, my kids aren't watching them, which, once again, we highlight animation is a medium, not a genre, and it's for everyone, not just kids. Guillermo del Toro leads us in that chant, of course. And actually, it was nice to have, again, for I think the second year in a row, an animated feature category that wasn't led into with, these are all for kids. That was rather nice, because I continue to say, if you want to find the best, most interesting stuff nominated for Oscars, look at documentary, international, and animated feature, and the short categories. I try to catch up on the shorts if I can, and I'm usually terrible with the shorts, but I try to watch the winners at least, and I always see the clips, and I think these look, even from very, very brief clips, really interesting. I've seen The Girl Who Cried Pearls, which won animated feature, and it was rather nice. I quite liked it. And I do want to check out one of the live-action short winners. There was a tie. It's always exciting when there's a tie, isn't there? I say that, I think there's been 2 while I've been watching the Oscars. But I do want to check out 2 people exchanging saliva, because from what I heard about that, what I read up about it, it sounds really interesting. One more point. There was a quote towards the end of, in fact, at the end of the In Memoriam section, and they got the In Memoriam section right. What a wonderful section that was. Not rushed, given time and space. A couple of very key, prominent people, particularly focused on Rob and Michelle Reiner, Catherine O'Hara, Diane Keaton, Robert Redford at the end. And I won't lie, I did start to tear up a little bit when Billy Crystal, after talking about Rob Reiner, ended and said, boy, did we have fun storming the castle. It was just a really nice touch at the end of that. But an In Memoriam section done right, but at the end of it, and look, you can say about the sound problems that the ceremony had, and there were a couple of them, or I think the set of the ceremony looked wonderful, but there were some sound issues, and not every gag landed, although I do think Conan O'Brien is very funny. I think most of his gags actually did land. He is a Muppet that has been turned into a real boy. And actually, I think it was a better ceremony than the ITV coverage would have had, you know. But then again, the ITV coverage, once again, just unnecessarily punching down and being critical of the monologue or the ceremony when it doesn't need to be. Look at the films, talk about those. And once again, the big problem in the ITV's coverage, this is the 3rd year in a row, is the fact that they're trying to cater to a mainstream audience of just people who are going to be casually watching, when the people who are going to be watching the Oscars are the people who want to watch the Oscars and probably know about it, particularly when it's going on at 1:30, 2 in the morning. But anyway, I'm going down multiple tangents, and I have rambled far, far too much. The in memoriam section ended with a quote from Robert Redford. It said, "The glory of art is that it can not only survive change, it can lead it." And that was something that a couple of speeches acknowledged. Documentary feature winner Mr. Nobody about against Putin mentioned that. There was a little bit of that in Joachim Trier's acceptance speech for Sentimental Value, winning international feature. It cropped up once or twice. But a real celebration of film, a real celebration of bold filmmaking, of genre filmmaking, and however much streamers may try to tell us it's not the case, however much, mergers may try to suggest that as well, and a lot of people, I think, who are trying to fight against the film industry. I think it's showing that cinema is still vocal, it is still alive and well, and it was a rather good ceremony with still some occasional surprises along the way as well. Not too bad an Oscars overall, I'd say, even if Hugh Grant still hasn't got an Oscar for Paddington 2.